Good morning, everybody. And I'm happy to be, I'll stand and then sit again when I'm talking. Yeah. Just to say I'm extremely honored and happy to be with all of you. And I thank Sunita and Ape for inviting me for this very, as I was listening to some of the speakers, I think this is the first time that you're having this gender equity forum. So I'm truly honored that you dared women and men of the YMCA. That's an irony, but it's good that YMCA is expanding its definition. And I loved how we started off. I loved how Meera started by issuing this declaration of war, to all the leadership, to say, we are here, and you better notice us or else. And I also like that when we were taking the photographs, I don't know who it was, perhaps it was Sunita, when somebody said, okay, what do we all say? So we said, equality. So then she said, peace. So I think that for me is very significant. And for me, it signifies the kind of battle I think feminists have been fighting, which is, yes, it is a declaration of war against all the structures of injustice and patriarchy and inequity that we see at all different levels. It is a declaration of war, but it is also a declaration of peace. And it's done through peace, because we need to speak the language of peace. We are surrounded by too much of war and violence. So we need change, yes. We need to war against injustice, yes. But how do we wage this war? I think that is the challenge before us today. And I think that is the challenge that feminists, I'm proud of the fact that as feminists, we have risen to this challenge. We deal with violence every day in the homes, within the house. It's not just outside, we're in the homes, everywhere. And yet we have to fight these battles in ways where we can sustain ourselves and transform the situation around us. Okay? And challenge, the structures to change as well. So yes, so with these brief words, I'll sit down. And I've been given 20 minutes. Yes. So hopefully I will cover what I want to share with you all in 20 minutes. And I hope that we will also have time for a good discussion, because I think I believe in a lot of interaction and discussion. I don't want to boringly speak, but so I would like. Okay, so what I'd like to be doing in this time that I have is to share some reflections from a critical feminist lens, as I said, as to what I think, should define diversity, equity, inclusion, that is part of your Vision 2030. And I can't help it, like I said, because I come from decades of involvement with the feminist movement, the autonomous women's movement in India, which has had at its core, what I would call, I am not a great believer in that sense. I'm quite a faithless one, very irreverent. But yes, of course, we all need to have some beliefs and some faith. And one of the faiths that have informed the women's movement that I have been part of is that the personal is the political. Okay, because I think one of the primary reasons why, violence against women, gender discrimination, it has all gone unnoticed and invisibilized, is because the personal always remained personal within the four walls of the house. Nobody wanted to bring it out. It's to do with the family. So how can you bring it out? Because then to talk about it is dishonorable. So it remained personal, it remained private. So women's pains, the victimhood of women also remained invisible. It was covered with a shroud of silence. But I think what the women's movement did was to say, no, what is personal is political, it is public. Domestic violence, for instance, is not a personal issue between a husband and wife. It is a public crime. It is not only a public crime, it also indicts the kind of political structures that have endorsed this kind of violence. So I think that is one part of the faith of the women's movement. And the other more equally important dimension of this faith is that we believe that the political is also personal, in the sense that what we understand as politics, the grand politics we see around us today, that too has to be redefined through the personal lens. So because for the dominant way of thinking, what does the dominant way of thinking do? It says that what is political and public is male and masculine, and what is personal and subjective is female and feminine. Okay, so we need to bring in also a feminine and a feminist way of seeing what is political and what is public. So I will be going into it, in the course of my, what I speak. What do I mean by this? But I will just end this part with, with sharing what Audre Lorde said. You all have heard of Audre Lorde? She is this very well-known poet, lovely, powerful poet, black woman poet, who said, the master's tools, because we're trying to dismantle this grand structure of patriarchy, right? So the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us temporarily to beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. So we need to set aside the master's tools and really find other tools to dismantle this edifice of patriarchy that we are talking about. Now, yes, I want to congratulate you on the very, far-sighted vision that you have, tried, where you've said that, diversity and inclusion are core to the YMCA movement, and it's a movement that is open and inclusive of all people, regardless of their ability, age, culture, ethnicity, gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, and socio-economic background. I think that is a very wide and expansive statement. And I think it's a very comprehensive vision to even, to realize this gender justice and equity. But unfortunately, today we live in very complex and very, very difficult times, and times in which we can't afford to take words for granted. Just because we say diversity and inclusion, does it mean that we become inclusive? Just because we say equity, does it mean that we become equal? Today we've just concluded in India, we've had this grand spectacle of the G20, which is the most exclusive, homogenizing old boys club that you can think of, okay? But they too will talk of inclusiveness. They too will talk of diversity. Our Prime Minister will talk of hope, harmony, and healing. But what is actually happening? What is the politics that is redefining this? I think we can't get swayed by these words. We need to understand the politics of these words. For example, the corporate culture today also talks of diversity and inclusion with great pride. So they celebrate Pride Month, but at what cost? How are they, it's like genders are becoming consumed and commodified. So what is being legitimized with this language? I think that is what I would like to push you all to really think. As you all are including this in your vision, please think of the kind of politics that is actually, what is the real meaning? The politics that is, which is creating a world which is so hegemonic and homogenizing that we have to repeatedly talk of diversity and inclusion and equity. Okay? It's very ironical because it is a world that is becoming homogenized, hegemonic, more masculine, and yet we will be talking of equity, gender equity, inclusion, and diversity. So please, let's think a little about this kind of contradiction that is there. So what I'd like to do is really share with you a little bit of my reflections, which come from the collective reflections of the feminist movement on this context, on the broader context in which we need to understand diversity and inclusion and equity. Now, as I said, this is a rather depressing time of the new global world order, which has become quite old today. A world in which we are witnessing the opening up of national economies, to the free flow of capital on the one hand. So we're becoming global economies. We're all becoming, even in Asia Pacific, where all of you come from, all our economies have opened up. We're no longer national economies. We're all global economies where we see the free flow of capital all over the place. But on the other hand, we see national borders are closing down. Okay? There's more and more immigration policies being put into place. Everyone's getting more scared. So national borders are closing down to free flow of labor. So you don't mind capital, going all across the countries, but you don't want the labor that comes, which means the laboring bodies, the poorer laboring bodies you don't want. You want the money. You don't want the poor people who come from other countries. And on the other, not only do you have the closing down of national borders, you also have cultural identities being shrunk. Cultural identities which were earlier perhaps more expansive. Today they're being shrunk to majoritarian ideas of religion, ethnicity, race, and caste. So I think this is, again, the contradiction that we are seeing. And while in this new world order, women's and gender issues may have been mainstreamized, to a greater or lesser extent, because today we are, we have a fairly progressive, atmosphere in which domestic violence, we have a law to deal with domestic violence, we're talking of sexual harassment, we're talking of decriminalization of homosexuality. I don't know in how many of the countries, it's there in the Asia Pacific, but I think there is a general opening up on these issues. But on the other hand, we also see that the levels of violence, discrimination, and misogyny, have they reduced? I don't think so. I think if you look at India, definitely at all levels, our indicators are domestic violence is increasing. And I think even the UN statistics says that 1 in 5 women are still, suffering from, are victims of domestic violence. 1 in 5 women. Okay, and this is supposed to be in this new progressive world. Okay, so here we have to understand patriarchy. So then why is this happening? Why is this contradiction? So I think we have to kind of look at patriarchy not only in its conventional sense, patriarchy as it is defined as a system of society or government in which the father or eldest male is head of the family. Okay, and descent is reckoned through the male line, or it's defined as a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. Yes, that is the conventional idea of patriarchy, but I think we need to go beyond this because we are seeing more brutalized patriarchies being reconstructed in this time of open economies and closed cultures. And what we see is that in this new world that is being grafted onto the old world, instead of weeding out the worst in this grand march to progress and development, all it seems to have done is deepen and build on the fault lines of the old, be it that of caste, religion, gender. None of these have disappeared in the new world. Have these disappeared? Has race disappeared? Has patriarchy disappeared? Has ethnic violence disappeared? No, all these are still there. Why? Now, if you look at gender, because if you're talking of diversity, okay, and how is diversity getting homogenized, in this world, we have to look at religion. We start by looking at religion. I'm sorry, all of you here are people of faith, so please forgive me if I make some transgressions, but I think we need to kind of really dismantle some of these things. So the women's movement that I've been part of has always had a troubled relationship, okay, with all institutionalized religions, and the patriarchal, cultures that they have spawned. All, this is whether it's Hinduism, whether it's Islam, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Buddhism, across the board. Firstly, because religion, along with all other institutions like the family, have been viewed as one of the primary site of the reproduction of patriarchal values. Okay? Religion has been. In fact, it has been said that religion is the original rule book of patriarchy that prescribes the societal do's and don'ts in any community. Okay? And almost all organized religions propagate the idea of male superiority. They paint women as physically, mentally, emotionally, and sexually inferior to men. And in almost all organized religions, restrictions exist over a woman's choice, over her body, sexuality, lifestyle, clothes, and just about everything. I mean, just look at the text of any religion and you will see how, it's informed by this kind of a patriarchal view. And what is ironical and sad, tragic, is that most of the organized religions of today were not discriminatory to begin with. In fact, many scholars contend that the religions were not patriarchal in the early stages of organized life, and it is believed that religions, or more appropriately worship, because it's not so much organized religion, but worship, centered on female goddesses during prehistoric times. And it is believed that prehistoric societies and belief systems are matriarchal, as is evident from the feminine-themed iconography, but that's another story. The question that confronts us today is what is happening to religion today in the time of, as I said, you have the opening up of economies, but you have the closing down of cultures. So what is happening to religion? What is happening is that what is happening to religion in the time of hyper-nationalisms, okay? So while the women's movement has been critical of institutionalized religions for institutionalizing patriarchy, the other critique of the women's movement has also been its links with the project of empire building, nation building, and nationalism. You cannot, separate religion from nation building, nationalism, and empire building. You cannot. You see down history, it has been connected, and whether it was for all these projects of, colonization, or whether it's, any kind of hegemonic kind of attempt at nation building, have been patriarchal projects in themselves that have legitimized notions of power that hegemonize, homogenize, and exclude. Okay, so whether it was the civilizing, instinct of colonization, that tried to civilize in the name of religion, or the kind of Islamic jihads against Western, imperialism, or whether it is what is Hindutva is trying to do in our country today, where it's trying to become the hegemonic religion as part of nation building. Today we want to, our government wants to rename even the country today, from India to Bharat. Now, what does this mean? It's not just that we're becoming more hyper-nationalistic, but we're also becoming more centralized and hegemonic and more masculine. So where is the question of diversity when cultures are becoming homogenized? Where is it? How do we even begin to look for diversity? So there is an issue. I think you'll have to keep a bit of track of time for me. Then you'll have to shut me up. Otherwise, I can just go on and on. Yeah. So I think this. So what I want to say here is that cultures are becoming more homogenized, and it is not an accident that this is part of the project of creating nationalisms, hyper-nationalisms, and globalization. It's all part of the same package deal. And it is, for example, and how do cultures get homogenized? We don't even see it. We don't even recognize it, but they get homogenized. How do they get, for example, the US, it's supposed to be a capitalist country. It's supposed to be thank you. But you have the dominant idea, the homogenized idea, is that of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the WASP, what they call the WASP male. Okay, that's that for Christianity, and for America, I think that's very clear. And then you have because in Saudi Arabia or in the Arab world, you have the Wahhabi Islamic male, who is a homogenized ideal. And then, of course, in India, we are having today this Hindu icon of Ram, the Lord Ram, who's become the male. We had 33 million gods and goddesses, okay? 33 million. So each one could have, it was very democratic, each one could have their own god or their goddess. But today, it's all been homogenized, and this one man, this poor Ram, and who was a very soft and gentle creature, but today he's been made to become very, muscular and male and masculine. You only have to give him a gun. That's all that they need to do. So that is the male, kind of icon. So this is the iconography that is being created, in this new world order. So that is as far as homogenization, in the modern globalized world. Now let's look at the economies, this kind of globalized economies, which is supposed to be creating more equality and equity. That's what it's supposed to be doing. And it's supposed to be bringing in a lot of plenty and prosperity through free enterprise. And it may be true. It may be true that, it has created pockets of some prosperity. There is some mobility. People have access to more money. People can buy mobile phones. Seemingly there is more, money floating around, and there's more prosperity, and there's more goods and services to buy. Today you have lots of more things to buy. But what is this being achieved at the cost of? I think this is being achieved at the cost of and this is because this is supposed to be part of the trickle-down theory, right? So if there's more prosperity on top, somewhere, that thing will trickle down, and the ones at the bottom will get some of that prosperity. Yet the reality is that this trickle-down process has enriched a few while propelling a great many more into structural destitution. I think that's what we see today. We are seeing a structural destitution in our countries. And unfortunately, the ones who have been able to take advantage of this development are the ones who are already privileged by caste, class, gender, and race. So who are the ones who are benefiting from it? Those who were already the beneficiaries of the old world order. As I said, we've been grafted, the new world has been grafted onto the old. So the ones who already were privileged by caste, by class, by gender, by race, those are the ones who are able to take advantage of this trickle-down theory. Now, how does this impact on women? Why am I talking about this? And how does this impact on women? it impacts, like I'll just give you a little example. It's from Kerala, your state bishop, and I think this was based on a study that was done by Nalini Nayak, who's from Seva, who's a feminist economist, and they did a study on the whole fisheries, you know, the fisheries industry. Today fishing was a livelihood, today it's become an industry, and how, you know, fisheries has changed under globalization. You know, like I said, it was a livelihood, but today it's become an enterprise. You need, you know, large trawling boats. You need to invest more money into it. So every fisherman has to invest at least 6 to 8 lakhs into that machinery, which they wouldn't need to in earlier times when they fished enough for their need. But today we are creating for people's greed, to cater to people's greed, not for people's need. So so then you need to fish more. If you have to make profits, then you have to, you know, get more fish, and so therefore you have to invest in, you know, equipment and machinery where you can, you know, do large-scale fishing. So what has happened is that because the need for money is there for investment, the practice of dowry. I don't know if how many of you have heard about dowry in India. Yeah, and I think not only India, it's in South Asia. I think Bangladesh and Pakistan and India, the whole practice of dowry. Dowry which never existed in those communities, in the fishing communities. And the fishing communities are Hindu, Christian, all of them. But dowry has come in there. Why? Because when you get married, you can make demands on the woman to get more money so that you can invest into your business. Okay, and so because this kind of, you know, extraction, you know, is becoming exploitative extraction is becoming so much of a burden for the parents of girl children. You know, they say, oh my God, when a girl child is born, oh my God, how am I going to get her married? You know, because marriage is, of course, the ideal. If you don't get married, you don't have a life. You know, you have no identity. Forget a life. You don't even have an identity. So if you, because they need money to get the daughter married, what is happening? They are getting rid of their daughters even before they're born. You know, there's something called sex-selective abortions. So they do these, tests which reveal the identities, the gender of the child, of the unborn child. And if they find it's a female, then they get rid of the fetus. So you have declining sex ratios. Okay, so Nalini Nayak calls this, she conducted this study, she calls this, what she says, that it is women and life systems that take the brunt of this kind of development. Okay, so they bear the cost of this kind of development, literally. And this I can give you lots of examples, you know, from, you know, how this kind of economic system has really not only impoverished women, but really destroyed them at different levels. Maybe when we have discussions, I can go more into detail. But what is happening is that the greater tragedy, you know, we started off by saying that we should, you know, question. We have to question, okay? We have to declare war on these structures of injustice. But in today's context, the other part of it is that you ask questions, and like before also, women used to be, you know, shut up, you know, to say that, you know, it's not your place to ask all these questions, right? But even today, when you ask, of course, it's not just women, but anyone who asks, who questions this model of development, this kind of hyper-nationalism, they are seen as anti-national, they're seen as anti-development, okay? So they're seen as, you know, anti-people. So the ones who ask these questions are being demonized. And especially when women have started asking these questions, these women are not only demonized as anti-national, but the kind of misogynistic way in which their mouths are sought to be shut is absolutely criminal. You know, I think there are enough and more examples. I don't know where in other countries of the Asia and Pacific, but in India, you know, all the strong women feminist leaders who have questioned this have all been threatened with rape. They've been threatened with rape. They, you know, their daughters have been threatened with rape. They have been called all kinds of terrible names like whores, etc. You want me to shut up? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, see, she's asking me to shut up. No, but you're right. There has to be space for everybody to speak. Okay, so this is the context. This is a general context, you know, in which, as I said, diversity and inclusion and all these words are getting very twisted and perverted. You really can't believe them, you know. Somewhere you can't believe the authenticity of it. So how then do we fight back? Because we also said, how do we fight back? So how do we respond to these new forms of exclusions and discrimination? two ways, I mean, which I, would like to present to you. One is by first seeing the interconnectedness of all different forms of exclusions. So you can't just talk of gender. You can't just talk of women. You have to see it in connection with race, in connection with caste, in connection with class. You have to see that some women get excluded more than other women. You can't afford that you only see gender as one grand overarching category. Okay? You have to see the links of gender with other forms of exclusions. That is one. And secondly, we look at structures of power and exclusion not only in the public and political realm, but also in the spaces that surround us. You know, when we say political is personal and personal is political, we have to question not only nation states that are becoming undemocratic, we also have to look at the lack of democracy within our own personal spaces, be it family, be it our institutions, be it our religious, organizations, wherever. We have to, if we are questioning democracy, we want more democracy outside, we have to create more democracy within us too. So that is another dimension that feminist politics, I think, has been brought in. And again, I want to quote Audre Lorde here, who said in the context of addressing misogyny, capitalism, and racism in the US, she said, "I cannot afford to choose between the fronts upon which I must battle these forces of discrimination wherever they appear to destroy me. For when they appear to destroy me, it will not be long before they appear to destroy you." Okay, so we must see the interconnectedness of different forms of exclusion. So now if we, for example, so how does this work? Like in movements, like for example in movements, how do you kind of see how this works? I'll just give you a little, when we talk of peace building, for example, okay? And there are many examples, but I'll just give this one example of, we are living in a world that is becoming extremely fractured, extremely fragmented, as I said, because of this whole hyper-nationalisms, which are there. And in our country, I'll give an example from our own country, where we're really facing what we call fascism. Literally, it is fascism of the Hindu majoritarian male. That is what we are. That is what we are facing today. But how do you fight it? One of a very interesting, campaign that I want to share with you is called "Mere Ghar Aake To Dekho." In Hindi, this means that come into my house and see. Okay, come into my house and see. So how are we countering? How are we saying that we need to counter this fascism from outside? We are saying that we actually, if you look within us, our homes should be places where we all come together. Okay, these are places of conviviality, of love, of togetherness, of inclusiveness. So we not only talk of love, so let's start from within the house. So we invite, in this whole campaign, which a call has been issued, saying that you open your house and your heart out to people who are different from you. They look different. Maybe they speak a different language. They practice a different religion. Maybe they're a different sexuality. Maybe they come from a gender, minority. Maybe they come from the LGBTI community. They come from a different class. You may be working in the corporate sector, but they may be, somebody who's a domestic worker. Now, why do you kind of keep these? Yes, these are differences, but these are diverse identities. But if we have to stop them from becoming differences, invite them into your home. See them as part of you. We are all equal. So this is actually a fantastic campaign that has really taken out, and it would be lovely if all of you also become part of it, where it's become a public campaign where we say, open your homes and your hearts out to diverse identities. Okay? So now one way of fighting fascism is to be there on the street. Okay, and to kind of make political battles. But we are saying make those political battles also personal. Bring it back into your home, where you can talk of love, you can talk of, inclusiveness, you can talk of, embracing diversity. It becomes easier. The language becomes, the way to do it becomes easier. And this has happened in a couple of big movements that we've seen in India recently. One is the we had something called the Citizens Amendment Act, which tried to make religion a basis of citizenship in India, which is a secular country. So there was this huge protest that, that was there, which was led by women, by Muslim women. And those protests were not at all like protests, including the farmers' protests. They were like celebrations of diversity. You had, and why? And I would like to think it was because women led these protests, and because women led these protests, they were not just standing there and saying, we want justice, we are against this, we are against that. They said, we are for another world, and they tried to live out that politics. They brought that politics out into the streets where women, children, families, everybody occupied the roads. It was not just, a few people standing on the road protesting against something. It was women creating communities. You talk of, resilient communities. These were entire communities that were protesting, but protesting in a very different way by celebrating their inherent diversity. So you had, the citizenship protest where you had women from all communities. It was led by Muslim women, but there were women from all communities and with their children, with their families, singing there. There were classes being conducted, for children. There was singing, there was cooking. So it was really a celebration of diversity and difference that was happening on the streets. And I would like to think that was really came from the women. And I will just end with again, I find these words very, very inspiring. This is from somebody called Grace Lee Boogs. She was a Chinese immigrant. She's a Chinese immigrant who was also part of the Black movement. And she says in her speech, which she calls Growing Our Souls, because these are difficult times. We need to sustain and nurture ourselves, even as we are fighting and we are trying to fight for something alternative. So she says, the time has come for us to reimagine everything. We have to reimagine revolution and get beyond protest. We have to think not only about change in our institutions, but changes in ourselves. So how do we reimagine? We reimagine by combining activism with philosophy. We have to do what I call visionary organizing. We have to see every crisis, because we have plenty of them, we have to see every crisis as both a danger and an opportunity. It's a danger because it does so much of damage to our lives and to our institutions, to all that we have expected. But it is also an opportunity for us to become creative, to become the new kind of people that are needed at such a huge period of transition. Thank you.